This is the In Your Faith Podcast. Today, Pastor Bill has a conversation with Greg and Jennifer Tonkinson about Christian education.
Well, hey, welcome back to In Your Faith Podcast. It's the podcast here at Arizona Community Church, and I'm Pastor Bill, your host today. I'm the lead pastor here. And today we have our friends, guests, members of our church. You were on a previous podcast before, but it's Greg and Jennifer Tonkinson, and I'm going to let you guys just quickly introduce yourself or reintroduce. You were on the previous podcast, but tell us who you are.
Yeah. Oh, well, me first. Okay, I'm Jen Tonkinson, and I'm married to Greg Tonkinson. We both teach at Valley Christian Schools. I'm at the junior high. He's at the high school. We were able to speak a little bit about our ministry with Unwanted Fraternity and our podcast that we do with that, and so we're grateful to be here today.
And if you missed that podcast, you can go back and find it. Very, very powerful, just ministry that you guys have. And so who has it harder, junior high or high school?
Junior high.
I would agree, actually.
I mean, it takes a lot of patience with those. It's a new day.
Labor of love.
Every day is a different day.
Yeah.
You don't know which kiddo you're going to get.
I asked you, hey, we have some spots open at the high school or whatever, and she's always said, I'm good.
Yeah.
I love my junior high.
I've done youth ministry, and I love doing junior high ministry. I love that ministry. It's just fun. And of course, I did it a long time ago when I was younger, so I don't know that I.
There's still a degree of innocence, like just trying to figure life out. But
anyway, well, hey, today we are talking about you guys are ministry minded, and if you don't know the Tonkinsons, you'll learn real quick. They're very ministry minded, not just with the ministry you have with Unwanted Fraternity, which we talked about on the previous podcast, but you have also started a new ministry. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we're so excited for several reasons. But back in 2015, I finished my research with Talbot School of Theology, and it was on how can high school Bible teachers help kids grow in their sanctification? How can we be more effective in that? Because I started at Valley Christian in 2008. And I had never known about Christian education before I started working in Christian education. I went to Arizona State and went to public high school. And so somebody, as I was pastoring a church and doing some pastoral ministry, said, hey, I know your degrees in your MDivs and biblical communication. Did you know that they're opening a position for a Bible teacher at a Christian high school? And I didn't even know there was a Christian high school. And so I got linked up with Valley Christian. So I started in 2008. My assumption when I started working there was, well, all the kids coming here know Jesus. They're all wanting to learn the Bible. They're all wanting to grow in their faith. It's just this like wet behind the ears, naive, like wide-eyed kind of Bible teacher. And I don't know, maybe I was 3 weeks in before that came crashing down into reality.
You realized you were in Thunderdome.
I mean, these kids, some of them love Jesus, some didn't, some were in between, some were just trying to figure it out, just like what I should have thought, and which I know today. So it began this journey of, well, what are we doing here? Like, what is the role of a Christian high school in a teenager sanctification? What is the role of a church? What is the role of a youth group? And so I just had these meta kind of questions of what are we doing in this kid's life? And by the way, if they do grow in their faith, who takes credit for that? Is it because you had a great youth ministry? Is it because you had a great Bible lesson in Bible class? So I wrote a paper on that, and then we got involved with Unwanted Fraternity. That took up our time. And then recently, we just came back with all post-pandemic, it became even more of an issue that with handheld technology now, 10, 12 years in the making, data started coming back as to, is it helping or hurting? And I just looked around because we're a technology school. We have one-to-one iPads. Most of schools now have a device in kids' hands. And I was an iPad champion back in 2016 for our school. And now the tide was turning like, is this helping kids? Mm-hmm. Is it hurting kids? And so I started doing more and more research. And because we had been doing the podcast with Unwanted Fraternity, we knew about podcasting, and so I started a podcast called Meliora The Podcast, wanting to just talk about that.
Meliora.
Yeah, I just so the way this started was,
well, hold on a sec. What does that mean?
Right, and so I thought, you know what, I want to have
Doesn't everybody know?
I want to have people over to my house in small groups that are pseudo-resident experts in a particular field. And so I would have all pertaining to teen sanctification. So I had athletes on one day. I had the athletic director and coaches and Bible teachers around good food and good drink. And I said, I just want to learn from you guys. How does a Christian teen who's also an athlete grow in their faith? Then one time I had high school principals over, and just how do you run a Christian school with the lens of how do kids grow in their faith? And so we'd have these moments at our house, but we didn't have anything to define the moments. And so just looking at, various, like, how could we title this? I came across this term. It's a Latin phrase, and it means even better. And I liked that because it was a little original, a little edgy, a little hard to pronounce at first. And I thought but that was the goal, is when you come to the house, and we call it the pub, when you come to the pub and we have these good conversations over good food and good drink, I want you to leave even better. I want to leave even better. And so I was basically hosting an in-person podcast, and the results were favorable. People would leave and think, man, I'm glad we had that conversation. And then I realized, but who else is hearing this conversation? So that's when we started the podcast just recently. We're only about a dozen or so episodes in, where we think more and more people want to hear this podcast. And sure enough, I have, in fact, we got lined up now someone from Louisiana and someone from Texas, and they just want to join the conversation.
And the conversation is Christian education? What is the conversation?
Yeah, so in Christian education circles, we talk about the three-legged stool model. Okay. It's the church, parents, and Christian education. I think that's a wrong model because, and again, I speak to this on the podcast, but I think it's a myth that all three legs are equal. So when you look at a stool, like these tripods here, they're all equal. In fact, if Andy were to take one of them and adjust it, one of it, the lens would swoop down. Well, the Bible, I think, comes along and says, hey, parents, your job is to train your kids up and discipline your kids up in the ways of the Lord. In Ephesians 6, dads have roles, moms have roles, kids have roles. And then the church has a role, and I believe Christian education as a parachurch has a role, but I don't think those legs are equal weight. And so what I think today is happening is many parents are dropping their kids off at church, dropping their kids off at Christian school.
For the last 50 years.
And they're saying, grow my kid.
Grow my kid.
Well, we're trying to swing that pendulum back to a parent and say, you know what, here, parent, we want to help you grow your kid.
So here's, my mind is racing right now because I'm like, oh my gosh, with the church, like ACC, we need to double down. That's so true. Right. We need to train and get parents.
Right. So I just started this talking about it in this medium of podcasting, and all of a sudden people are jumping on saying, oh my goodness. So it's not just for Christian educators. It's for people that have an influence with younger people. Yeah. But the three primary spheres would be Christian education, parents, and church.
Real quick to that, my wife and we raised three kids, and they were going to I'm a pastor, my wife's on fire for the Lord, and they got, as far as in-home spiritual privilege, very few kids would have had it better.
Right.
But I can't even tell you how much I needed a church and a youth group.
Yep.
But I didn't think I needed Christian education. For the longest, I grew up in the public schools in California, and I told my wife, I said, no, we're going to send our kids to, and she's like, no, we're going to send them to Valley, because back then Valley only had high school.
Correct.
And so, and Bethany at the time didn't have scholarships. And so here's a funny story. Jody, there came a point, we homeschooled for a while, but then we wanted to put him in Christian education, but Bethany didn't have any scholarships. So we called Char Bear. Yeah. And Char called the principal over there, and sure enough, the Miners got a scholarship. And I think they instituted scholarships.
But it's not what you know, it's who you know.
And the Bears are amazing.
Here's another story, is I was still I'm like, okay, so they're at Bethany, and we got a great scholarship, and we can make it happen. But Valley's coming, and I think they were more expensive and so on and so forth. And I was in the office one day. I was the associate pastor at the time at this church, and Mark Bistricki, who was the former principal, he walked in and he introduced himself, and he goes, "Hey, I'm here to introduce myself. I'm the new principal over there, and I wanted to let you know we're reinstituting the pastoral discounts to." Yeah. And I'm like, God, that's just like you to provide. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to very easily send our kids to Valley and get them through Bethany. And I will tell you that, and I tell people this all the time, whatever money you're saving for college, spend it now to send your kids to Christian education before it's too late. Because if they're it's that valuable. I found really it to be that. The pendulum swung so far for me from we don't really need Christian education to now I'm like, I would only advise Christian education.
I just talked to a kid in college a couple days ago. We had coffee, and he said, "I'm in college, and it's a Christian college by name anyway." And the college wanted him to write a paper on equity and various groups that need to be more equitable toward these groups. Yeah. And probably know what kind of groups. And he stood up to his professor and said, okay, I want to write the paper, but I want to write it from a biblical worldview standpoint. And she said, no, I don't want to bring religion into this conversation.
At a Christian school.
At a Christian, so-called Christian school. And so we had coffee, and his heart was, how do I fight the good fight? And I said, well, what are you graduating with? And he said, I'm graduating with a math degree, and I want to go teach. And he said, where do you think I should teach, public school or Christian school? And I said, you know what? Honestly, 10 years ago, I probably would have answered that question differently. Go be a light into a dark world I said, now my advice is this. Unless God is like we had talked about in the last episode, audibly telling you to go teach in a public school, I just don't know if it's worth it because of what's happening in our culture today by way of, I don't doubt that you'll be able to stand in the gap, but the kind of persecution that you will face by way of losing your job, defending the faith, having accusations levied against you because you asked a kid if you could pray for them, or that was the way they interpreted a particular message or what. I said at a Christian school, here was my advice, is maybe come out of college with all of this great, student teaching and knowledge. Start at a Christian school. Start getting your feet under you by, what it takes to become a good teacher. Yeah. Master the aspects of becoming a good teacher in an environment that will pray for you, that will support you and your faith. Then maybe 4 or 5 years down the road, when you're a little more seasoned and you want to step into the public arena, maybe that might be the path for you. But at this point, sending a 22-year-old young person into the public,
I've never heard that. I always say to the parents, and the common thing you hear with Christian parents is, well, I want my child to go be a light in this public school. And I'd say, we would never do that with a missionary.
100%.
Go out somebody
go
going
by
out
yourself.
Going by yourself. We would, to become a missionary out on the field, you have to go through intense training, lots of training,
and be mature in your faith. And what, this kid's 12.
Yeah, he's 12, and I think, and I'm not, I know. Because I was in the same place of a lot of Christian parents at the time, is like, there's no way I can it's the money.
Right.
It just comes down to the money. It's like, I can't, there's no way God's going to provide. There's no way this can happen. And that's one of the reasons our church has been a big supporter of Valley Christian.
Huge supporter.
Is we want to make Christian education as easy as possible for people.
And we love that. One of the many reasons we're here at ACC, but we love the fact that there is support, and getting back to this model. So my model isn't a 3-legged stool. It is, remember the big wheels back in the day?
Big wheels,
The
yeah.
tricycles,
But I lean towards the green machine.
Okay, good. Yeah. So green machine, big wheels, right? Tricycles, if you're that of that age, but one wheel is bigger than the other two, right? So that's my model, is that the parent wheel is the biggest wheel, and then church and school come along and support the effort to grow the kid in their sanctification. Whatever you do, I think that those three entities need to support one another. And there's such a lack of that. It's almost silo mentality and almost like we're competing against one another. So part of the podcast is to help people understand, man, let's link arms. The next generation's is at stake here.
And there's a whole lot more at stake. The very fabric of the country these kids are living in is at stake. Everything's at
They're
stake.
the next politicians. They're the next lawmakers. They're the next doctors, nurses, teachers.
They're the next parents, too.
They're the next set of parents.
Yeah. So, Jen, let's brag on you for a second. You were just not only nominated as Christian Educator of the Year, you won that award. Tell us about that.
Yes. That was through the Herzog Foundation, who we are partnering with now with our podcast, which is so awesome because we'll be on their podcast network.
Yeah.
I was very shocked that
it's hard to brag on yourself.
It's really hard to talk about it, but I had never heard of the Herzog Foundation, quite honestly, until I was nominated for this award, but I did get to receive it.
Can I tell the story?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're sitting in
That'd be
a
helpful,
staff
thanks.
meeting. So Valley Christian has about 160 staff members, faculty and staff, and we rarely get together, maybe twice a year. And it was at the end of last year in our last meeting before we broke for the summer. So we're all in this big auditorium, and this video comes on from the president of the Herzog Foundation. And he's a real gregarious guy and big personality. And he said, we've searched the country and we took over 700 applicants and we narrowed those down to 12. And one of them is sitting in your audience right now.
Really?
And I was just like...
And you guys had no clue.
Well,
No.
I knew I had... I went through the paperwork, so I knew
Correct.
that.
Yeah, there was an application
Yeah.
process, but that was like months ago.
Yeah.
And so nothing had been
So
talked
then
about
I started
since.
thinking, oh no, is
And,
this me?
and
Like,
she
am I
didn't
going to
know
have to
if
sit up?
other
Are people
teachers
going to
had
look at
applied,
me?
right? Blah, blah, blah. And so he narrows it down to, and she's been a teacher, so we knew as a woman for X amount of years. And then I said something like English or something.
Well, and we said that's your middle school,
Your
which I
middle
was
s-
like,
yeah.
well,
and
I'm
there's only
junior
7
high,
middle school teachers.
but
So now, and then he said, Jennifer Tonkinson, and we were just
Wow.
like,
I was so
this
shocked.
is insane.
And you were
yeah.
one of 12 people, Christian educators in
in
the
the
whole
country, yes.
Across the whole
and I got to
country.
meet them all
Awesome.
at their headquarters in Missouri, and then they flew us to Washington, D.C., the Museum
Big
of the Bible. And
ceremony.
it was really
And-
awesome.
was so
And
cool.
Valley Christian Schools is one of the top 50 schools
50 in the country.
in the entire country as
Yeah.
far as Christian education.
Yeah,
And
it's phenomenal. This year we're applying for exemplary accreditation. Like, things are happening, and I'm super glad. But I will say, I was talking to someone about this just recently because they were asking to come on the podcast, and we were talking about demographics and whatnot in the Valley, and it dawned on me, Gilbert Christian, Scottsdale Christian, Northwest Christian, Phoenix Christian, Valley Christian, and they're all decent sized schools. Because he asked, how big's your school? And I said, well, we're K-12, we're about 1,100 or so. And he said, wow, that's a big school in Christian school circles. That's a big school. Well, Scottsdale's about that same size. Gilbert's about that same size. Northwest is a little bigger than that. And I thought, wow, we are so blessed in the Valley to have so many options. Because that's another thing we hear is, where you guys were on, over in Chandler. Oh, well, I live in Queen Creek, or well, I live in
there's
Peoria.
no excuse.
And there really is. I could point to you all of these really good Christian schools.
Yeah.
I would say to any parent out there, honestly, if you want to help your kid grow in sanctification, I think that one of those pieces of the puzzle is Christian education.
I would wholeheartedly agree. And again, just to stress how important I think it is now, as I tell people, I know you're saving for college. You're better off spending that money now.
Yeah.
Get them into Christian education.
And it's not that Christian education doesn't have its challenges. I mean, we deal all the time
Yes.
with discipline issues, and I would say, though, the place you're dealing with them is the right place, where parents can come together with administrators and coaches and teachers and say, hey, pray for my kid. Hey, how do I help discipline my kid? Whereas, yes, they may get that at a public school or a charter school, but that would be by luck. That would be by chance. You go to a Christian school and we all sign statements of faith. We all promote biblical worldview. So you at least know that's what you're getting in. Not a perfect system, but I would definitely choose that.
Yeah. One of my favorite things was like for my son Ben when he was on the soccer team, is just them getting together and praying before each game. They would huddle up, and all the we were sitting in the stands, and I'm like, where else are you going to get that?
Right.
And
those are their formative years.
Yeah.
Where the goal for Christian parenting is, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. We want our kids to leave us, but we want them, again, Meliora, we want them leaving better than when we first got them. And in our day and age today, that's very, very hard to do.
Yeah. On a side note, this is just something I'm thinking about, is when I served on the board over at Valley for 3 years, and one of the things, and dealing with elder boards as well, is a lot of times we bring people onto boards because they're gifted people, they're successful in whatever career or whatever it is they're doing, but it doesn't necessarily mean they know Christian education.
Right.
And so I think one of the things that could be very helpful, and I don't know if Valley's done that because I was on the board a long time ago, is really helping new board members understand the philosophy of ministry of the school, because a lot of times it's just like, come on the board, sit down, here we go, and it's off to the races. Do you? And I know this is kind of out of left field, but do you have any thoughts on that?
Super excited about. We have a new head of school, and our previous head of school, Dan Kuiper, was there as a teacher and as an administrator for 40 years. The school's only been around for like 42, and so glad to have.
And Dan still looks like he's like 42.
Oh my gosh, he is the
and
epitome
he retired
of,
to go into helping with STOs, and he's still working.
Involved,
he's still involved with Christian school.
Our new head of school, Troy Thielen, young buck, and what I love about Troy is, to your point, Bill, he wants to bring theology as the centerpiece of the board, of our faculty, of our parents. We're starting a new initiative this fall called Parent University. And the whole push is, do we know this good book? Do we know the Bible so that we lead well? If you're at the board level, do you take these decisions, which we're dealing with millions and millions of dollars and all these, we have 2 buildings now and 35 acres or whatever. Are we doing that under the guise of, God, what do you say about this? Because the Bible does talk about how to make a good building plan and how to go forth with good leadership skills.
And real quick, if I can interrupt, one of the things that I quickly realized when I came on the board is there were different philosophies of Christian education on that board.
Right. And
there were some that were saw sports as a massive part of that and needs to be driving the engine. Others that didn't. For me, I came into a world I didn't know.
Yeah.
I had the theology. I had my own personal, I was a pastor and I went to seminary, but.
Yeah. Well, and that's what people think. I think the misnomer with Christian schools is we're all just going to sit around the table and hold hands and pray. And while that is good, and I love that, it can get political. It can get, different agendas. Yeah. So I just love Troy's heart where it's, hey, I want to use, like you're running multi-million-dollar companies. I want to use your skill set to help us grow as a school. But if we don't do it with Christ being our one and only, our all in all, and let's not just say it, let's model it, let's live it. And part of the podcast is to tell Bible teachers, to tell youth pastors, to tell parents, modeling a Christian life is half the battle for these young people. They want to see the people above them, albeit imperfectly, living Christ out in your sphere.
So let me bring up a sensitive issue for me, at least, and maybe you guys maybe we don't want to go there, but one of the things that, there was only one thing that concerned me, for me, when I was on the board that really stuck out to me, that if I was, and I may have brought it up at the time, but honestly, I was a young father and young associate pastor and had a million things going on, and I was kind of concerned that Valley there was Catholics and Protestants at the church, at the school.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, wait a minute, isn't this a Protestant school?
Yeah.
And if so, how are there, because I know my wife would be in a prayer group and she would come home and go, yeah, this person's really Catholic and they go to this Catholic. And I'm going, well, what gospel are we teaching to these kids? Because at the core of the Protestant Catholic debate is the doctrine of justification. So am I broaching a subject you don't want to broach right now? But any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
To me, it comes down to like I was just
Greg
a little concerned that maybe
qualified.
we were blurring the lines under Christian education so much. That was the one thing, like, because when I was on the board, there was guys that were really like, hey, we need to get better at sports because sports draws kids, and I'm like, great argument, I love it, but for me, my theology mind just kind of went, but hold on a sec, can we step back?
Yeah. I remember being called in, probably about 6-7 years ago now, Mark Bistricki, speaking of him, and they called me in over the summer, and I was the chair of the Bible department at that time, and they said, hey, we want to hire a coach, but they attend, I think it was St. Tim's or St. Anne's or something. What do you think about that? And this was back in the day, and I said, here's my only thought about that is, I want every faculty member and every staff member at Valley to promote their church. That if you have a teammate, a kid on your team that says, hey, coach, I'm looking for a church.
Yeah.
The very first thing you should say is come to my church. Like, we should never be a part of a church that we're embarrassed to bring people to.
Yeah.
And so I said, because of that, I have concerns that theologically there are too great of differences between Protestant theology and Roman Catholic theology that I wouldn't feel comfortable if my kid came home who was on that team and said, hey, Coach so-and-so just invited me to their church, happens to be a Catholic church. So I said, if that's the case, then I would recommend not having a Catholic coach. And they agreed with that, and we didn't have that. And then I said, my question, though, is if that's the case and we don't have Catholic faculty neither, why are we accepting Catholic families
that are signing a statement of faith?
They're signing a statement of faith. And that was their argument was, well, they're signing a statement of faith that is Protestant. And I said, I get that, but my analogy still plays in that if you're in class, because I tell my seniors this, because I taught upper division, hey, if you have a freshman come up to you and they're looking for a church home, you should be inviting them to your youth group. And so the same concern I had was, well, if you go to a church that doesn't represent I'm saved by grace through faith alone, then I have some concerns about that.
Yeah, and that was the thing that was more concerning to me is like how parents are signing off on the doctrinal statement. At least when I was on the board, I believe you had to sign off on a doctrinal statement at that time. And I'm like, is the doctrinal statement so vague?
Yeah, it's not. It really does promote. Now, I would say from the time you were on till today, we have strengthened that statement where I think even in parentheses, it talks about the 5 solas. And but you can still sign that and that doesn't necessarily mean that you abide by it. But what we've done this year is we've introduced our faculty to Wayne Grudem's Christian Beliefs, the smaller version. And we've addressed that very issue that you're bringing up, Bill, with our faculty. And we're moving down a path of really wrestling with just asking the why question. And I'm not a prognosticator. I don't have a crystal ball, but I would say it's moving in that direction of all Christian schools should be asking these questions.
Yeah. And Catholics,
and wherever
too.
you land on the issue is where you land.
Well, it's Catholics. I would expect, and I know that Catholics do this very thing. And we're not saying this as, I would expect that if I sent my son or kids to a Catholic school that, hey, here's what we believe, you're signing off on it. And so I'm not saying we're going to have this is an expectation across the board. And I always say this, the people 500 years ago during the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation, the Council of Trent, the Catholics and Protestants 500 years ago understood what Protestants, Catholics today fail to understand. We fundamentally have really core differences in our beliefs. The Protestants, Luther said that the entire Reformation really hung on the doctrine of justification by faith alone.
Right.
And anyway, so that was, but this goes back to the issue of training board members. I was invited to come on the board, and it was like, come to the first meeting, sit down. And I was already like, I had to vote that very day.
Yeah.
I was voting on things, and I'm like, hold on a second. So
and that's what I love about any organization, churches or schools. We started in 1982 or 3, I believe, and so I've watched these great videos about the history of Valley Christian, and what I love about it is, man, you look back and it is a testimony of God's grace and goodness that He continues to say, man, you guys are, you're missing it here, or, there's some blind spots here, and I will continue to be with you and grow you. Stay faithful to me. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that.
And it's the same thing with our church. We're a non-denominational community church, which, other people joke there's the non-denominational denomination.
Yeah, right.
But even our own doctrinal statement, have been working with a couple of our pastors and even a couple board members to go back through our doctrinal statement and go, where are we strong? Where are we weak? Where do we need training?
Always. We should always be about the business of asking those questions. Yeah. The sacred cows, the traditions, why do we do them? Should we keep them? Yeah. And again, I love our head of schools direction, which is, let's just ask. And if it works, if it fits within the mission, let's do it. If it doesn't, let's really investigate why. Yeah. So
okay, awesome. So let me throw out another broad question, and Jen, I'll throw it over to you first. What is the current state of Christian education, just maybe in general, but here in the Valley, and then maybe even more narrowly at Valley Christian?
I think that parents are trying to find a way to get into Christian education. And you mentioned having that financial ability to do that. Christian education is, at least at Valley, I can speak for Valley because I can't speak for the other schools. I think parents want that education for their kids. They want that safety net of we know that they're teaching Christ in the classroom. Right. But our schools, at least Valley, is really starting to pivot towards, like you were saying, we want to make sure that everything we do is glorifying to God, that we are not missing the mark on that. And so educating faculty is super important, but also evaluating the type of curriculum that we're teaching. Are we using biblical illumination in every core subject? That is super important to do. Every teacher should be well-versed in the Bible so that you can teach it in math and English and science and so forth.
Let me stop you there and ask you a question. Both of you. Isn't that why? I guess you just assume that that's happening in Christian education, but it may not. Is what I'm hearing you're saying, that just because a school has the term Christian on it doesn't mean that you're getting what you think you're getting.
I remember a youth pastor, my very first year at Valley Christian, again, like, oh my gosh, this place exists, and super excited, and talking to a youth pastor, and he said, hey, I got some kids from Valley that go to my youth group. I said, man, I'm so excited about that. And he said, hey, next time you're around the principal or whatever, tell them to put the Christian back in Valley Christian.
Oh, wow.
And I was just so defeated. Like, he thought it was a cool little quip or something. Yeah. And I just
But there's truth. There was some truth in it.
And so I didn't have a skin in the game at that point. Yeah. I just, started at Valley. So I didn't know if he was right or not right. And again, like, to your point, just because you slap Christian on a school, some people will make assumptions. I think we've been in the game long enough to not make assumptions that the glass isn't half empty, but we need to look at this realistically and say, okay, we just hired a new English teacher. Do you know what it means to teach from a biblical worldview? Yeah. Like, I'm not, like, we need to jettison that assumption and work more towards, if you don't, perfect, let's train you.
Yeah. It's, coming from a public university, you would not know how to do that. It was something it's something that's learned, and it has to be practiced, and it has to be also brought down to multiple levels. So you have, and what I mean by that is, you have kids who are coming into our school who maybe don't own a Bible at home. Maybe their parents are new Christians. Maybe one person is a Christian, one person's not a Christian. Maybe they bounce back and forth. There are so many different scenarios with these kids coming in. Yeah. And now we're expecting them to know every single Bible story because you're now in 8th grade, but you've never been to Sunday school in your life. Right. And so It is a huge, it's a very large mountain that we're trying to piece, kind of take apart and look at how do we do this well so that, again, every classroom, every teacher is teaching their core subject, but adding in daily that biblical illumination so that all the kids are like, oh yeah, that's what that means. I've heard that before, and giving that opportunity
and going to the
teacher.
Kids. So an area of weakness for me, and Jeff and Tina Schuler go to church here, and Jeff is really good at this, and he has an eye for it, and I realized I don't. When we hire somebody at this church, I assume you're hired, go do your thing. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm not, so my gift isn't necessarily, I don't see the eye like, hey, this person needs to be trained. I'm weak in that area, but Jeff is, and he's helping me in that area. But
with Christian educators, because that needs to be strengthened as well. And thankfully at Valley, I know it's being strengthened at other schools where we are actually hiring people to recruit. Yeah. So one of the positions new to Christian education in many cases is a recruiter to go get talent that is not just, back in the day, I can remember being a part of the Bible department, and there was one year where we needed to fill the 10th grade Bible position. Well, this is very common in Christian education. You need a degree to teach English, as Jen teaches. You need a degree to teach history or science. But if you just love Jesus, well, you can teach Bible. And so one particular year in Bible 10, we had 5 different teachers. I was one of them. Yeah. We had a gym teacher, a choir teacher, we had a special ed teacher, and a science teacher. And we all took a section, and then we had these meetings, and I'm the only one with the MDiv, which is fine. Yeah. But and in these staff meetings, how was your class? People would be crying because these kids were asking pretty difficult questions. And what do you expect? It would be like you or I going to teach science class or going to teach gym. It's like, but Bible had this persona of, hey, anyone can do it because you love Jesus. Right. Well, we have elevated that now to no. What's your educational background? What's your training in this? We're trying to go get people that can do it well.
Let me ask you this question, because I would tell Dan Kuiper, I was worried that Valley was growing so fast, and I wrote Dan an email. We talk and he would email, but I emailed him one time and I said, don't get enamored with the PhD. Yeah. Although the education is super important, I said, make sure, more importantly, that they're sold out for Christ. Right.
But
I was more worried that we would get a guy that's a PhD.
Correct. But the best of both worlds is in fact, speaking of 10th grade Bible, our current 10th grade Bible teacher has his PhD in Hebrew, and he just took a team to Honduras. That's awesome. And loves Jesus more than the 3 of us combined. Like, this guy, it is so, and I keep asking him, when am I going to get your resignation letter that you're going to go teach at seminary or college? Right. And he said, Greg, I love 10th grade kids, and as long as God will have me here. And I said, you're the guy. Like, you know your stuff. You run circles around everyone, myself included, but you have a heart for ministry. And he was former youth pastor. He just loves kids. Yeah. And I'm like, man, that is...
I don't know all the teachers over there, and I didn't when my kids were going through, but it just seemed like even when my kids were going through Bethany, which became Valley, and the high school Valley, Valley is just... Every teacher I ran into was amazing. Like, I never really, I didn't see it. Sure. But I'm sure you guys said, when you know teachers better than I do, but I think Valley's been incredibly blessed that way. By the way, Omri Mills, you know Omri, he was one of my son's Bible teachers. And then he left, and ACC actually helped fund him to plant the church over in New Orleans. Yeah. So I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah, I still stay in touch with him.
Yeah, no, we do too. But we supported him too. The ACC did. I don't know if you guys knew that part, but
and one of the things we want to do with the podcast is we want teachers, we want faculty, not just at Valley, but all throughout the Valley, throughout the country, to say, hey, you're talking about this, and I have an opinion about this. I'm invested in this. I'm a part of a Spiritual Life Directors Network, and it is the funniest thing. We'll get on these Zoom calls, and the chapel will come up, or small groups will come up, or Bible class will come up. And it's like everyone looks around and says, oh my gosh, you're struggling with that too. Oh my gosh. Once you find people that are running in the same space you're running in, the camaraderie is palpable. It's just there.
Let me ask this question, because you raise an interesting question. What do Christian educators struggle with? Like when you get to, like, I need to be in a group where I can unload.
Right.
What do you guys, what burdens do you guys carry and struggle with?
I say culture.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Culture is so powerful in
culture,
in these young kids' lives, so much more than their parents, so much more than the teacher. And so that culture is constantly competing with the truth that we're trying to teach them from the Bible. They're hearing truth from their social media.
Do all the kids in middle school have phones?
No, I would say not all of them do. I can tell the kids who don't.
Oh, really?
They're super attentive.
High percentage do.
High percentage do.
So this is fascinating. How can you no, this is really fascinating to me. How can you tell?
I can tell when a kid has social media or has a phone based on their knowledge of the world. And so
more or less?
Less.
More.
They have less knowledge. If they have a phone, they have
more.
more.
It was worth doing this podcast just for that moment.
Jinx.
Mark that moment and put a star by it.
I was saying that they have more knowledge of contemporary culture.
Kids who have phones.
Correct.
I'm sorry. I was talking about the kids who do not have phones.
There you go.
And they are more attentive in class. They're just not. They're not willing. They're not doing all the trends. They're looking around the kids who are doing the trends, thinking, "Why are you saying, skibbity toilet now?" Because that's the big thing now, saying weird things like that.
Oh, interesting.
In junior high, but they get it all from.
What does that mean?
That's the question of the year.
Okay.
Like, what does skibbity toilet mean?
I said to our group of kids at the high school, I need 6, 7 of you to join me in this small group, and they started laughing.
Yeah, because
I thought.
Trend.
Like what did I say? I thought
7,
I said a curse word or something, and I went home and I said, I just said this. I said, I need 6, 7 of you to come over here. They started laughing. Jen's like, yeah. So I posted. We have a family group chat, and I posted the family, and immediately we have 20-something kids. Ages 20-something, and
I was like, no,
they started giving me like it's a meme that's floating around now.
It is, but
that I didn't know about, and that's how you know if the kids have phones or not, because they know that stuff.
Memes.
The kids that don't,
it.
they're just looking at like, why is that funny?
But it is. I think we do compete with culture quite a bit in the classroom, especially when it comes to what they think is truth.
Yeah,
and we're trying to.
So let me ask another question. I'm just going to jump in here because I have a million things racing through my mind. Going back to what you said earlier, Valley has become, every kid gets an iPad. Yeah. As a matter of fact, that started, I think you guys started that.
2016.
I remember my son Jonah had one and Ben had one, and I think Jonah did too. So that was back when they were there.
Yep.
Are you now for that or against it? Is it a good thing or bad thing?
I'm against it.
100% against it.
Really?
Yeah. And
so
I have a picture. I have a picture that I'm holding up. I'm holding my MacBook, but underneath it says iPad Champion. Yeah. I went to several different schools around the country when we were investigating this, trying to figure out, because they were leading one-to-one initiatives. How are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And again, 2016, 2017, it was the thing. It was like, oh my gosh, your kids have iPads and we want to get them. So then we got them. Huge investment. And the teachers initially loved it. It cut down on grading. It made things more succinct where you could find things. I could have kids research in the classroom. Oh, it was so wonderful. And then right around pandemic-ish, and since then, it has been distracting beyond belief. It has been a tool for nefarious things going on,
especially with
cheating,
AI now,
lying, AI, all of that. And so starting next year, we're a phone-free school. Next year, we're going to phone-free. And by the way,
we've gotten rid of the iPads in the junior high.
And junior high don't have iPads anymore.
And are you?
We use them on
we
cards.
will
so
still
I'm
have
assuming
iPads.
That the other educators are with you on this. Are they all with you? Is it
most?
Most.
So we will still have iPads, but our iPads are on such lockdown because they're with the school network. But
so
phones,
are you for the iPads, or are you, when you
I'm
say
for
I'm against
a very locked down iPad?
Yes.
Okay, but
much
the
like
phones,
a Chromebook.
yeah.
A Chromebook would be
the
better.
Phones, you got to go phone free.
Yeah, phone free.
Phone free means what? Because I think that there's
literally no phones from 7:30 to 3:30.
No,
if I see it, I take it.
Well, they're putting them in their backpacks.
If we see it, we take it.
That's what we do. Yeah, and if you see it, we take it.
Because I am for that,
asked.
and I'm getting more convicted personally myself about how much I scroll, and I'm like, I need to turn this thing off.
Yeah.
But
Have the policy here at ACC. Every staff member
phones.
has to put a phone in a pouch from 7:30 to 3:30, and you can't that's
And you
what we're
guys
doing
just use
at the school.
walkie-talkies around campus.
During
No,
lunch,
the
during
problem,
breaks. You
that's
can't.
not what I'm worried about. I'm not worried. I don't scroll at church. What concerns me is when I'm home at night and I'm falling asleep, and I'll I'll scroll and I'll look over at the clock, and there's no way I
you
just
got lost
think
in the
about
hole.
that. Think about that. You're 150 years old. Think about the kid that's 16. And by the way, you and I got our phones in 2008, 2009, 2010 at the same time as that generation, younger generation, got the phones too. We all got the shiny package at the same time. But now that, our age, we got other things going on in life and whatnot. But these kids now, they were birthed into technology.
Yeah,
they
that's
know
all they
nothing
know.
but technology. So to tell a kid, you can't use your phone from 7:30 to 3:30. I mean, Jonathan Haidt with The Anxious Generation, Leonard Sachs, Collapse of Parenting, they all write the same thing, which is this is an addictive tool.
It is
and the data's come back
beyond belief.
So we are trying to help kids break the addiction, and if that means you can't have your phone.
Why not have kids turn their no phones on campus at all?
They won't do it. Oh.
Who won't do it?
In
other words, if the policy was you are not even you have to
Right.
leave your phones in your cars,
Right.
or bring them and check them into the main office, and you can get them before and after.
Because someone's
Some
got to
schools do
manage
that,
500 phones,
Yeah.
and they're expensive
Where do you
phones.
put all the
so one of them
500
goes
phones?
missing or something. So, and then they have these not new, but a lot of schools are using these pouches that have barriers that you can't get a signal inside the pouch. You have to be cost effective, but at the end of the day, we are sort of last in line with this initiative. So many districts, and by the way, public school districts.
They recognize
LA
it,
just did a big one.
Yeah.
They recognize this is killing our kids. And I don't say that in hyperbole. It literally, based on depression, stress, suicide attempts and stuff, it all drives back to porn addiction. It's on your phone.
Yeah, let me ask you this.
Take away the phone.
Are you guys... So what I love to see, one thing I love to see is when a younger generation grabs onto something biblical, and they're more mature in that area than the older generations.
Right.
And are you guys educating your kids over there on the dangers of these things, so that maybe they'll go, you know what, I don't want it. I'm not even going to bring it myself. And to the point where they own that this thing can be very dangerous. Is there an education plan for that? If there's not,
well, starting in April, we'll do Parent University, and so we're doing 4 sessions, and we've tied it to re-enrollment cost. And so we're saying to parents at Valley Christian Schools, if you believe in the 3-legged stool model, then we're going to give you a slight discount on re-enrollment costs, but you have to attend one of these 4 sessions. And all these sessions are meant to do is to give you more resources to parent better.
Yeah.
And that's going to be part of that conversation.
But I'm wondering if you couldn't have a class, and again, I'm just brainstorming, but make it a class where you teach the kids themselves and just reinforce and go and really unpack
Here's what the
that.
kids
they know.
Do they?
Well, they
kids
know, but
that they are.
They know, but they don't, in the sense that they don't want to be told something. They want to tell you something.
I asked my 12 and 13-year-olds last week. I said, before we got on break, what age would you give your child a phone? 16, 18. What about social media? Definitely 18. I said, why? Because you have social media. And yeah, we know, but it's not good.
Right.
And they admit that. But they can't break away from it.
Correct.
And so they're so addicted that they keep pushing, going into that little candy.
Yeah.
But they would never do it for their own families.
It really is
I do have hope in that they would never do it for their own families.
I would like to see this. I think America, our country, would be wise to, and there was a rumor out there, and I don't know if it was true or not, but it was that Bill Gates, purposely didn't give his kids. Now whether that's a myth or whatnot.
Sounds good.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it were true.
I wouldn't either. A lot of A-list Hollywood stars, their kids don't get to see the movies they're in.
Yeah.
It's not a double standard, I don't think, as much as these people know the reality of these tools, and they're smarter than we are to say, no, my kid's not, I'll do it for you all because you're buying it, but my kid's not going to be a part of that. We've met so many families that are thankful we're doing this because culture says you're going to be an outcast if you don't have a phone. If you don't have social media, you're going to be way behind in terms of pop culture. And we're partnering with parents now and hopefully churches to say, no, we support that. This is wrecking kids. Yeah. So we're not going to have it.
I wonder, and I'm just brainstorming here, because your phone will tell you how much you've been on the phone, right? And it would be interesting if at the end of the week, a kid brought it to administrators and said, look, this is how little I've been on it. I met this goal if there was some reward for that.
And here's the funny thing, because in class, now that we still have phones for this last semester, I've had kids in certain classes pull out their phones and check their battery usage and what apps are on. Can I just tell you that for some of our kids, they're alarmed at that number. Other kids pride themselves on that number. They almost brag about how much they're on their phone, and they don't realize the damage that's being done. And that's just, to me, that's heartbreaking.
And it happened I'm sure it happened, I know, when the TV came out. It's like...
Right. But you remember...
That's all we had growing up was a TV, but I could park myself in front of that TV for hours on end.
And think about that, like the discipline it took when there were only 3 channels and it was, grainy screens and, but I would say wholeheartedly that's different than a kid parking themselves in front of a 4K screen that has 150 channels, and quite a few of them are immoral at best.
Yes.
And so it's a different world.
And then it's just the accessibility to be able, when we grew up, when summer came, there was friends I didn't see for 3 months.
Yeah.
It's like, see you in 3 months.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also friends where you didn't see them till the next day.
Right.
But you can leave school and you're in touch with every friend 24 hours a day, 7. And that's dangerous in and of itself.
Incredible. Yeah. And so what we do on the podcast is we don't just talk about the problems. I'm asking for solutions, and I'm doing that almost selfishly. So I've kind of cast the net out to all Christian schools, all churches, all parent groups. If you've found something that works, even if it's just within your family, would you please share that?
Yeah.
Why are we holding that information back? Yeah. Like, I'll get the word out. If you're a school and you found out how to do the phone-free system well, please let us know.
Give us tips,
Give us tips. Yeah. We're all in this together for the goal of, we want this next generation to be culture changers for Christ. What's best practice?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Very, very, very. That's a fascinating. And this is news to me that Valley is changing its policy on the iPads or just the whole phone thing.
Yep.
Because I remember when the iPad, we were going to get the iPads, and I was for it too. I'm like, this is we're school that's on the front end of things and not on the back end.
Did you know that kids are using so everyone has the Bible app, the Bible. The big one.
Bible app.
Yeah, the Bible app.
Bible Gateway?
No, it's just the Bible
one
app.
that Life Church TV put out.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Bible app, the big one. And so, but kids are using that to communicate with one another because we have like no messaging on your iPads or whatnot.
Uh-oh.
Well, there's a message section on the Bible app, and so they'll talk to each other through that app. Like, if you put a device in front of kids, they'll find a way.
They will find a way.
I just saw yesterday a teacher who, it was unfortunate, they had a relationship, it was somewhere in the country.
Yeah.
And this person was a music teacher, and they found a music app where they could do just that, where they could communicate, and it was near impossible to find them.
Right, yeah.
That they were having that discussion.
Yeah. No, our IT department, I love them to death, and they're some of the most hardworking people.
Yeah.
But isn't it sad that part of their job is to play the police?
Yeah.
Like, they got to stay one step ahead.
Right.
But kids are kids, right? Yeah. And so in Christian education, public education, it's the same. I would say that our hope in Christian education is that we get to use the Word of God to train these kids, that it's not just what you're doing is wrong. Let's look at why God doesn't approve of this.
Okay.
And parents, let's lock arms. Churches, let's lock arms and help these kids understand that.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question that's going to put me in the crosshairs, and I'm probably not going to like it because what you're going to answer is probably what I did. What drives you crazy about parents? my kids were under your care, and I was parent.
Yeah.
I was one of you. I
You were
was
a
one of your
great
parents.
parent when I
Yes.
had your kids.
Yeah, I know. Okay, thank you. But what do parents do that only complicate the situation for you guys?
They don't trust us, I think.
Okay, what is that? Unpack that for us.
They side with their kids before they come to the teacher and just say, hey, you're the adult here. I know kids have different perspectives. They see everything through that little tiny lens of being a kid. Can you tell me a little bit what happened?
So I'm going to tell you a quick story here. And I've told this from the pulpit, but when I was probably in the third grade, it was where you bring the parents to school, but it was in the evening, you know, and whatever what's that called?
Back to school
Back
night.
to school night. And my dad was standing and talking to one of my teachers, female teacher, and he said it quietly, but I heard it, and I started crying. He goes, "You can spank my son whenever he is out of line." And I was like, Dad, don't say that. But that generation, our parents were just the opposite.
Oh, yeah.
I could have said, Mom or Dad, I'm right here. And they would go, no, you're not.
100%, without question. And in 30 years, that has swung almost unequivocally over to my kid's right first. Mm-hmm. And then the school has to prove why they're wrong.
So what do you
Video
account for that?
cameras
What made that? Do you know why that happened?
Yeah. So again, Leonard Sachs wrote this great book. I highly recommend it, called Collapse of Parenting. And he's a PhD, MD, did a bunch of research. And his claim, along with all these other guys, Jonathan Haidt, all these other guys, have data to back up that right around the 2010, right around when this technological shift happened, parents gave up their authority in a right relationship, which was parent to child, and now it's become peer-to-peer. Mm-hmm. And so parents, somewhat voluntarily, but just over time, they gave up that God-given right as a parent to say, this relationship you're the child, I'm the parent, and there's authority where I set the culture, I set the rules, I set the boundaries, and there is a level of obedience to where I'm not seeking your opinion on these things.
Now, let me ask you a question. I would say the pendulum was maybe too far the other way with our parents' generation.
Correct.
Like I did not count my dad as a friend.
Correct.
He was my dad.
Right.
And
he
to
was
a certain
disciplinarian.
extent, I feared him, and mom was the mom.
And a lot of parents back in the day, they erred on that side of, you have no voice in this, and it was almost tyrannical. And we don't want that for sure. The Bible doesn't speak of that. But it has swung so far over to, I want to be your best friend. And so, and when you add to that, where do kids get most of their information from today in terms of wisdom? Peers. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't have to be like best friend peer. That can be, I'm following an influencer online who's my age, never met them, never will meet them. But if they say jump, I'll ask how high. And so mom and dad come along and say, no, we're going to go this direction. And the kid says, but my influencer friend says go this direction. I'm choosing this direction. And mom and dad say, well, I don't want to rock the boat, so I'll go with that. And what the kid hears is, I'm the one in control now, not you, mom and dad. So when the kid comes home and says, Miss Tonkinson accused me of cheating on the exam, mom or dad says, did you? And the kid, of course, says no. Mom and dad say to Miss Tonkinson, dear Miss Tonkinson, my daughter said she didn't cheat. Now you have to prove she did cheat. As opposed to Miss Tonkinson says back in the day, hey, your daughter cheated. Thank you. We'll deal with it. That's all that needed to be said. And now she's got to have video evidence. She's got to have transcripts.
So
she's got to have testimonies.
I just saw a video, and I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but it was in China. I saw a video the other day, and when they take tests, each kid has a camera on him.
Oh my gosh.
I've seen that, yeah.
And so they're
But why? Like, why does it have to be that way? Because we're taking it to the next level of, how can I get away with this?
Right. Well, that's a sinful nature. But to your point right there is, we shouldn't have to have video evidence of our kids cheating to trust the teacher.
We have it in every hallway now, and
But
part
we have
of our
cameras all over our children's building.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to in
You
this day
have
and
to.
age. But
part of our security's job now is to review video.
Yeah.
And again, sad but necessary.
Yeah. In my day, my teacher could have slapped me in the face and I would have told my dad and he would have just said, you just probably deserved it.
Yeah, how come it wasn't harder? Yeah,
How come it wasn't harder?
Why not the other cheek? Yeah, I mean it.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to advocate like that's what teachers' roles are, but so many teachers are leaving the profession not because of salary, which has always been deemed as low, not because of tenure, because of disrespect in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot handle the disrespect.
And not the parent support behind it.
And the parent support of that disrespect.
So what are some other ways, Jen, you're the one that brought the subject up. What are some other ways that parents don't trust? Is it just discipline? Can you think of other areas where you're finding yourself frustrated with that? And again, I'm putting you on the spot there, and Greg, you can maybe speak to this, but we can come back to that.
Well, just real quickly, because of the internet, Jen's degree is in English, mine's in biblical communication, whatnot. Because you looked up an 8-minute YouTube video does not mean you're the resident expert in a field. And we have some parents that, it's just human nature to say, well, I watched this video. I know as much as you do.
That is,
And we just want to get back to, no, we spend time getting educated in these fields. Like, I have great respect for people that go get their education or through apprenticeship or whatever. Like, let's just because I watched a video.
Well, and this is to doctors. One of my best friends, who is my primary care physician, goes to this church.
Yeah.
Tom Sy, and
I can't even imagine.
I feel so bad for him. I'm just like,
imagine?
People coming in going, I've self-diagnosed. I know what's
told me that. Yeah. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
8 years of med school.
Yeah. Is there anything else that frustrates you about parents? Because parents are going to be listening to this. So this is your opportunity to say, stop doing this.
Yeah.
Or do more of this.
Yeah. I mean, I would say the do more of.
Yeah. Do more of, I guess, trusting us in the sense of we do have your kid's best interest at heart. There are teachers out there who don't. I understand that. There are certain situations where teachers should not be in the classroom.
Like, now, help me understand that, because I can. What does that even look like?
Ill-equipped.
Yeah, ill-equipped.
Just ill-equipped.
I'm saying across the nation. Okay, so there are teachers who aren't always like, oh, I love your child.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we chose to be in this profession. We do like your kids, and we have a heart for them, especially at Christian school. We are praying for your kids.
Yeah.
And so when we come to you with a situation, maybe a discipline situation that is heavy on our hearts because we've called a meeting now, hear us. And instead of accusing us of not understanding your child, yes, I know we don't live with them, but we do spend a long time with your kid.
And there's a humility there, just having a teachable spirit. It's hard for anyone to hear tough news.
Correct.
But especially when your child's involved. I mean, there's not more of a sensitive subject.
Very protective of our kids, yeah. And I would, for as many challenging conversations that we have some great conversations with parents that not only get that piece of parenting, but they also get the involvement that when we have an inordinate amount of parents that volunteer and we do this engage mission trips. I can't tell you how many parents I have to turn down for that because they want to go support the programs and they care about this. So there's no broad stroke of all parents are doing this, but it is synonymous with where our culture is today.
Let me ask you this.
That they're in that
with
boat.
all of the cultural craziness that has happened as far as gender and all of that stuff, do you find the next generation of younger parents more passionate? Because I feel like it refined what we went through and what culture is going through with all of the cultural nonsense. It was a good thing in this. Christians realized what was at stake. Do you feel like parents are are realizing just the war that we're in?
The younger parents?
Just any if I went through the last 5 years with kids that were in middle school, I now see the writing on the wall. The other side, meaning our culture, those that don't believe in Christ, they're playing for high stakes.
Very high.
And our kids, they have our kids in their target, and I see that. And so for me, I guess the question I'm asking are, do you sense the pendulum shifting in parents that they're seeing how significant this is?
Yeah, I think they're shifting in desperation with, because again, you can't stop time and do this in a vacuum. You're raising kids at the same time you're trying to get ahead of them in this area. So we have many parents that are not waving the white flag, but asking for help. Like, help me do this. What classes can I take? What books can I read? What courses can I go to? And then there's this young group of parents, Christian parents, that I'm so excited for because they're finding pockets of other like-minded believers where they're getting into these parenting groups saying, we've agreed our kids won't get social media till they're 15 or 16. Our kids won't get a phone till they're 8. And they're making these kind of pacts as 5, 6, 7 couples together because they realize I don't want to fight this alone. If I can surround myself with same stage of life people, but we all agree we need to do this for the benefit of our kids. So I'm excited for that because that's what needs to happen.
Yeah. That's awesome. That is really, really awesome. So tell us your ministry, like what are some things that you have on the horizon that you want to tackle or you're tackling with?
Yeah, so we just got
I was going to say the name of your ministry, but it's escaping me right now.
Meliora The Podcast. Meliora.
Meliora.
Meliora The Podcast. And so looking forward, we're having spiritual life directors from around the country talk about their schools. And what we're trying to conclude, the hypothesis is we're all dealing with the same challenges. We just got through an episode where we talked about in my research, I came up with 7 challenges in Collapse of Parenting. Leonard Sachs, he has 7 challenges. Jonathan Haidt has challenges. People like Sean McDowell and John Stonestreet. It's all the same language. And what we're trying to do on my podcast is to come to the conclusion of, let's admit these are challenges. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're on the East Coast, West Coast, if you're in a rich neighborhood, poor neighborhood. These are the challenges kids are facing. And we can nuance those challenges, but overall they're the same challenges. Okay, what's the solution? I just don't want to live in the challenges. Yeah. Back in the day when progressive Christianity kind of came to the forefront, Donald Miller and Rob Bell and all these guys, they would write these very captivating books, Blue Like Jazz and the like, but they didn't have any answers. It was just raising questions. And you can remember, maybe you read these, like I'd read these books and I'm like, let's throw rocks at the church and ask questions like the church can't answer. But then you get to the end, you read the last page and it's like, you felt empty. Like, okay, that felt good to criticize for a while, but there was no solution.
But in the case like Rob Bell, he would raise these questions and he kept going down. It led more progressive.
And everyone joined in on, this is not going well. And then, then you find yourself at the bottom of the hole. I want this podcast to be more, we need to address the challenges. Now let's talk about, here's what's working at my school. Here's what's working at our church. I would like my nephew as the youth pastor here at ACC. I want him to be on the podcast saying, what works for you? Let's agree there are challenges, but man, what are you doing so that someone across the country will hear that, try it, and say it worked for me too.
So how do we find your podcast? Do you have I know this is the newer of the ministries you started. Tell us how do we find you? Do you have a website?
Yeah. So as Jen mentioned, we're partnering with Herzog Foundation. And so if you go to herzogfoundation.com/podcast.
How do you spell that real quick?
HERZOG. Herzog.
Okay.
And so the Herzog Foundation, you can on Spotify.
By the way, I would
YouTube.
hope that if I asked 2 Christian educators how to spell that.
I had to think about that first.
The teacher of the year.
Teacher of the year.
From the organization.
Right, from the organization that made you teacher of the year. Yeah. And so Herzog Foundation, you can go on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're already up there, YouTube. So if you just Google search.
Is there a book in the future?
We were talking about that because we did Unwanted Fraternity, the book, and it was a process. It's challenging, but we love the result. So yeah, probably
awesome.
Probably in the future.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
So.
And if people listening to this wanted to contact you guys directly, is there a way that they could bypass all of that and somehow get to you guys?
We're also on Instagram and TikTok, but on Instagram you can DM us, and we'll talk to
LinkedIn,
you.
DM us.
Yes, LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for
Thanks
being
for
on the
having
podcast.
us,
And
yeah.
we'll talk about this more. This is an
Absolutely.
ongoing discussion
It
for
is.
sure. But thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast, and we will see you next time. God bless.
The In Your Faith podcast is a production of Arizona Community Church. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to come back next time for more great content.